Well, good afternoon. Happy Thursday afternoon.
Yes.
We're back. It's Between Two Bibles today, and we have a fun assignment in front of us as we're looking at it. What are we reading this week?
Okay. Psalm 138 to 140, John 1 through 4, and Daniel 1 through 12.
All right. What are we talking about today then?
Daniel.
And the lion's den, because we're in the lion's den right now, here in our video and metaphorically in life. So it's good to be with everyone today as we dive in. We're getting close to the end now. It's
More videos after this?
It's gonna be quick. When you get to through Ezekiel, I think that's the last major, if you want to say hurdles, and hard to read. Ezekiel is that kind of hard read. And now here we are pushing into Daniel and all that.
Daniel's fun. Well, the end is a little confusing.
Right.
And people make more of it than they should.
We'll talk about, but we'll get there. But what's something that you kind of enjoy about the book of Daniel, or something that sticks out to you before we dive in?
Well, there's a lot of the Sunday school lessons from Daniel. You got Daniel in the lion's den. You got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with the fiery furnace. Even where we get the word, the phrase the writings on the wall, that comes from Daniel too. And there's the Veggie Tales with the giant bunny. That's the fiery furnace story. It's a giant bunny instead of a golden statue, but
well, as we were preparing, you and I were both singing some of the songs, right?
From Veggie Tales, yeah.
From Veggie Tales, the bunny. Oh, I love the bunny.
Yeah.
The VBS song, right, that we sang a few years ago, the Here Kitty 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 Kitty, about Daniel there. I think in the popular imagination, we do have these very familiar, the fiery furnace, the lion's den, all of that, and it just kind of, I think these are some of the most interesting stories, perhaps, in the Old Testament, and some of the most curious too, and there's a lot of fun with them. And a lot of theology actually plays out. Jeremiah's letter to the exiles kind of leads into this, and then in the New Testament, there's these ideas of living in Babylon kind of pop out again too in Revelation. We'll see this in Peter's letter when he's writing to the churches in Babylon. This theology kind of plays itself out. So it's kind of a fun book that way. Anything else you can think of?
I just remember when I finally read Daniel all the way through, I think it was in high school,
Yeah.
and realized how all these stories actually connected, because they were separate in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever connected Daniel to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Right.
Which is also weird that we refer to them by their Babylonian names, but Daniel still by his Hebrew name.
Right.
Because they're, I memorized this during VBS views. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, I think, are their actual names.
Yep, that's good.
They almost rhyme, almost.
Daniel's an interesting book too, for the fact, if I'm remembering correctly, it's actually not all written in Hebrew. There are actually, I think about half it's Aramaic, and there's actually probably maybe some theology of why that's the case. So the first couple of chapters are in Hebrew, most of it's in Aramaic, and then the very end goes back into Hebrew, if I remember correctly.
What's the difference between Hebrew and Aramaic? Because Jesus speaks Aramaic.
Right, they're cousin languages. They're both Semitic languages. So on the family tree of languages, Hebrew and Aramaic would fit on. They're just kind of like how French and Spanish would be. There's a lot of similar sounding languages. They come from the same line. And just kind of how language develops. Hebrew is kind of an older, archaic, and it just kind of gave way to Aramaic. You can kind of see it maybe in English right now as we're transitioning, as English is continuously changing too. If you look at the these and thous and things like that, you start seeing these subtle changes in languages that start splitting over time.
We don't understand Old English anymore.
Oh, right. Yeah, if you overlook an old English language, you can't read it.
You won't understand it, even though it's technically English.
Right. So it's just that's some of the similar situations there. Daniel's also interesting because, if you read the Greek version of the Old Testament, there's actually extra chapters there. A lot of it's actually just hymns and songs. So, for example, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're thrown into the fiery furnace. We're told in an extra chapter in the Greek version that they are singing hymns to God while they're in the furnace, while God is with them. So they're singing hymns of praise. So the Song of the Three Children is what that one's called, actually. And then there's another one, it's the dragon. Apparently there's a terrible monster that was there, something like a dragon kind of thing, or dinosaur or something like that, and they worshipped it as a god. And Daniel goes and takes the sword and beheads
Beheads dragon.
So kind of like your legends of, knights slaying dragons kind of thing, kind of maybe originates from this kind of thought. And he slays the Bel the dragon, and so there's a story in that there, and he gets in trouble for doing that too, but then he's vindicated because just like the other accounts here. So the Greek actually has a few extra chapters that are included in the apocryphal version of Daniel. So extra little things. Esther's actually the same way. But yeah, this is actually from the Hebrew text. So our version, what we get here, comes from the Masoretic text. This is, the Jewish line that follows from the Old Testament, not the Greek translation, for the most part here. So just some extra couple side tidbits on the book of Daniel. So maybe context before we dive into the narrative itself. What is led up to Daniel?
It's the Babylonian Captivity. So this would be, Daniel would have been in the first wave of captives from that when the Babylonians came in, and because Jerusalem falls shortly. After
falls
this.
in 587 BC is when Jerusalem gets taken. This is 605.
So Daniel's probably part of the royal court or something, wasn't he?
And this is kind of something. So we're back up Old Testament. The people of Judah, the southern kingdom, are still living in the Promised Land, but they have about 20 years until they're kicked out. But we see here that before they get kicked out, there's a kind of a waves of being deported here. The Babylonians come in and they're kind of they depose one king, they establish their own puppet king, one of the siblings, and then they take a group of people into exile. And typically what the Babylonians would do is when they took people into exile, they took the cream of the crop. So the Assyrians, what they would just do, they would just slaughter a ton of people and then just scatter them. But the Babylonians kind of improved on that system by saying, we should take the best of their people and put them into service for us because that's going to make us better. So that's what they do here with Daniel and his three friends here, which they get called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They get taken into exile and they have to go to work in the king's court. So kind of the setup of the book here, and this as this theology plays out, is that how can you still be a follower of the Lord, right? In our context, how can you be a Christian
in a pagan culture?
In a pagan culture that's against you, that is looking to, take away your faith, your identity, everything. How do you retain it? And this becomes kind of the struggle in the book. How are they going to assimilate themselves into Babylonian culture? Are they going to resist that culture and fight it? We've seen how well that's worked. They kind of choose here a middle ground. So they get taken into exile and change our names, take away our names, because usually your name gives you your identity. And so they're thinking, if you take away your name, if you take away your house, you take away where you lived, your family, everything, you'll assimilate into our culture. And we're going to see here that there's going to be times where they're going to be okay with that they will allow their names to be changed. They will work in the court of the enemy, the king. But there's going to be times when they show forth, no,
we're not
our
going
true
to
loyalty.
Bow down
Yeah.
and worship an idol.
Yep. And so they're going to show forth their true loyalty to God, which is kind of, as we look at our culture, right, how do we both struggle to live in a culture that is growing antagonistic to the Christian faith, and at the same time, how do we faithfully care for it, live in it, but yet at times realize there's going to be opportunities to stand up and say no, because we're going to show forth our true loyalties and where they stand. So how do we be good citizens, but how do we be good Christians? And the book's going to show us that there's times where that's going to come into conflict and tension, and there's times that's going to live out well. And we shouldn't be surprised by that in our own day and age too. So this book, I think, is very helpful, and I think this book is going to shine more the more we get into a post-Christian culture, probably antagonistic. I think we're going to see that a lot more. So, yeah. Good. Anything else that you think we can hit up with context here?
Well, the events of the book take place over about 70 years.
Yeah. So Daniel he's not the same age here at the beginning of the book as he is at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, when, you pictured it in Sunday school, the lion, him in the lion's den, you're picturing someone who's maybe like in his 20s, and he was actually probably 50, 60.
Right. Maybe pushing 70.
Because he actually lived through several kings, because there's Nebuchadnezzar, there's Cyrus, there's Darius.
Right.
And some of them, it's Babylonian, and then it's not, and then Babylonians get taken over, by the Assyrians? No.
The Persians.
Persians.
Yeah. And we kind of get a clue into this here. If I flip here a little bit ahead. At the end of chapter 6 here, we're told that, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Cyrus the Persian comes to rule in 538. The book begins in 605.
And Cyrus is the one who let the Israelites go back.
Yep. So he survives through this whole time. So he lives through the entire captivity. So from 605 to at least 538, which if you stop to think about that, that's 67 years. So he's probably at the end of the book in his 80s at this point. If he's 20 years old when he's carted into exile. So that's a big time gap here in the book, which we'll find some of those fun things too. Good.
Anyway, I suppose we should dig into it.
All right. With that in mind, keep it in mind, how do you be faithful in your context? That's how the book's going to begin. So they get taken into exile, and we were told their names, right? Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They're from the tribe of Judah. They're probably relatives of the king, so you're part of the royal family. And they get their names changed, which also each of their names refers to Yahweh. So Daniel, I forget what Daniel means, but something God. The God is your strength or something like that. Hananiah, you hear the Yah there at the end. Those all are names with Yahweh. Well, they get named after, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which are names of Babylonian gods. So literally it's taking away their very core identity of being named after Yahweh. Now they're named after pagan gods. And then, of course, they find out they allow that, but when they get put into the service of the king, what will they not do?
They wouldn't eat the food from the king's table.
Yep, or the wine.
Yeah, which some people try to make this out as like this great way to diet or something, but doesn't it have something to do with like pagan
culture
and sacrificing meat and stuff?
Yep. So they would probably, right, because they would maybe eat pig and pork, unclean animals, which they won't eat. They would, they might sacrifice it to their gods, and then they would offer it because.
So the same thing like Paul's telling Christians later in one of his epistles about not eating food sacrificed to idols. And
this is maybe something to say in our culture and context, as unfortunately what secularism has done has made us realize we just kind of do things without thinking about it anymore, including food and eating. In the ancient world and still today in the Eastern countries and things like that, eating food is a very religious thing to do. It's it's a kind of a liturgy that goes along with it. The only thing that's still around for us is the prayer before you eat. That's one of the last remaining parts of the liturgy before you eat. But here they would sacrifice the food to their gods. They would offer it up to them, and then they would take part of it. So you're communing with their God when you partake of the food. You can think of our own Lord's Supper context here. And then, so sharing in this, it means you're sharing in their religion, their beliefs. And this is something that they will not do. They will not partake in this foreign worship, as it were. So, so they refuse to do that. So what do they say to do instead?
Well, they say just give us vegetables and water.
Right.
And the steward at first is like, I'm going to get into trouble over this. And they're like, try this for, try it for 10 days and see how, and they are... what is it? They're better in appearance and stronger and whatever. Anyway, the food is better, so then they give the food to everyone else too. Which I always wonder what everyone else thought. Like, we're no longer getting the choice food and wine.
Yeah.
But
we see here how God preserves them in this, right? Yeah. He honors this. God's gonna rescue them in the moments when they stand up for Him. Even when they say we don't need God to stand up for us, know that He can rescue us, but we're not going to do this, even if you do kill us, kind of thing. So this is the first kind of push and shove.
This whole story reminds me a lot of like Joseph in Egypt. I mean, it's the same sort of idea where, he started low and then ends up, second only to Pharaoh. Right. And this, Daniel kind of, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego also kind of, gain high positions.
Yeah.
In, to
the
rise
in standing.
Yeah. And, they're faithful to God. And
Yep. Which should tell us, too, another thing, too, as Christians, is that, some people want to run away from the state and things like that. But as Christians, our faithfulness compels us to enter these services, not run away from them.
It's a way to serve your neighbor.
Yep. So we need good Christians to get into government. We need good Christians to fight for these things. And Daniel shows us that there's going to be times when that's going to be antagonistic, and they're going to oppose that. and maybe even kill you or whatever, but you're going to still stand up for it because this is who we are.
But we don't become like
people.
monks and
Right.
retreat from the world either.
Exactly. There's going to be opportunities abounding, which is this book really is going to shine with that. This fits along with Jeremiah's letter to them from Jeremiah 29. It's just, good stuff.
He references Jeremiah later, doesn't he?
I do believe so, if I remember correctly.
We'll get there.
And so we have, they get presented until to Nebuchadnezzar for service in his court. And now this is, you're thinking, okay, how's this going to go down, right? Because here are these Judeans. This is a perfect opportunity. They served the king. They could maybe poison him. They could, stab him in the back, assassination kind of thing. And we're going to see they're actually going to be some of the best citizens of their. In fact, they're going to be better citizens than the other rulers that they're going to serve along with too. So that kind of will work into here well. And as you said too, I love what you pointed out there. This reminds you of Joseph, and it should. This is exactly the Joseph narrative is being replayed here in Daniel.
This is even the dreams.
Yep, even the dream parts, right? Which that makes you think, wait a minute, I've definitely heard this story before. Which the Old Testament does this so much over and over again. It'll have something that happens in earlier, and then you're going to see that later. So it's almost even in the book of Genesis will actually teach you to do that with Abraham giving Sarah to pretend like, hey, you can be his wife and things like that. And you're like, wait, didn't you just do that? Because the book is setting up, you're going to see this play out in a smaller scale, but also on a bigger scale. And here we're seeing this, thousands of years later, the same story being repeated here with Daniel as it was with Joseph. So that's a really good observation. Good. So the dream, what is the dream in chapter 2?
Is this the one with the giant statue with the four different, the head's gold, and then there's there's 4 different parts, and they're each a different material. And
what I love about this dream is that Joseph, this dream is even more ramped up from what happened with Joseph, because what does the king want them to say? He wakes up, he has this terrible dream, and what does he command his people to do? To
not only interpret the dream, but tell him what the dream is, without him telling.
Because then he'll know that they're actually telling him the truth, if they're able to tell him what the dream was. So I love this because they're like, how
are we supposed to tell you what you dreamt?
Right, you're the one that's supposed to tell us this. And then also this is the decree goes out that if no one is able to tell the king, he's gonna put the order for execution on them all, because they're all a bunch of liars. Then he's not gonna have liars and backstabbers in his court. But we find out that Daniel goes in and he's able to interpret the dream, and so he brings them in. And he tells the king what the dream was. You dreamed about this statue, head of gold, shoulders of, what was it,
I've got to find it.
It's a silver.
Iron, clay, bronze, silver, gold. Okay, hold on. Feet of iron.
Chest and arms of silver.
There we go.
Middle and thigh, bronze. Its legs of iron. And then feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And he interprets to them that of course, is 4 kingdoms.
Yeah, so the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar, and then after him, he's going to be deposed by someone else, and then that kingdom's going to be deposed, and then that kingdom's going to be deposed, and then a rock. Is this where the rock comes and hits it too? Is that?
And those, yes, the end there, verse 44. And it'll stand forever, just as you saw the stone that was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the clay, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, its interpretation sure.
So, because this is what Nebuchadnezzar gets deposed by the Persians, and the Persians by the Greeks, and then the Greeks by the Romans. And then that's when Jesus comes, which presumably is the rock that destroys the whole thing and the mountain grows.
Yep. So what Daniel's, and he's going to see this a little bit fleshed out later, right? This is the dreams at the end of the book. But here we have this, one kingdom replaces another. They're always typically weak, right? So you have your gold age, your silver, your bronze, things like that. And it just kind of gets weaker and weaker. And in those days, right, there's going to be the mountain, the top of the mountain gets sheared off, right? This is the Lord Jesus coming down here. And he knocks down the feet, and because the feet are destroyed, the whole statue falls over. So Jesus is going to come in his kingdom. We got to stop thinking about this. Not only affects the future, but it changes the past. It vindicates the past, maybe is a way to say that too. And so it's going to change all of history, just not the future, but the past too.
Also, I say Jesus coming into history is like dropping a rock in the middle of a pond, and the ripples go all directions.
Yeah. And so not just a future thing, it's changing the past. Which that's kind of, if you stop to think about that, the reign of Jesus is going to come and change the past too. Something to stop and ponder maybe exactly what does that mean. Yeah. So, the kingdom of God's going to establish. This is God's kingdom that's going to come. And, for Daniel, this is also kind of an image of hope because he sees this and he knows, hey, God's kingdom is going to triumph over whatever is going to happen. Whatever kingdom's going to rise and take over and be powerful, it'll all be for naught because God's going to do his thing still among us.
Well, we see this in all the prophets where it's, God is, the prophets are announcing judgment on, the people of Israel, but also, there's always the areas with they're pronouncing judgment on all these other kingdoms and, the Babylonians are going to come in, but God also pronounces judgment on them later, and no kingdom stands forever except for Jesus's.
Right, a kingdom that has no end.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God. So because of this, what happens to Daniel? He predicts the dream and tells the interpretation.
And Daniel is promoted.
Yeah, so we're going to see this a lot. And then as you push on to chapter 3, this is the most I think if you know Daniel, this is probably the chapter that everyone would know.
Besides this one.
Is the golden image. And I like what you had to say. You had
a
thought.
I'd never noticed this before, but, you get in his Nebuchadnezzar's dream, you have the golden head is Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
And then in the next chapter, you get Nebuchadnezzar making this giant statue all of gold.
Right.
And so I kind of wondered if there wasn't some, where he...
That's a great idea.
Yeah, either this great idea, this giant statue, or maybe he's thinking if he makes this giant statue all of gold, it means that these other kingdoms aren't going to come after.
That's true too.
Because the people are supposed to bow down and worship the statue, so maybe that's what is going through his head, that, if we worship this golden statue, that means my kingdom will last, and I won't be... Anyway.
What I love about it, we just read this chapter during the Easter Vigil.
Yeah.
And I love it because Greg, one of our head elder, read this chapter during the readings. And I love it because when you read this out loud, it's so, what's the word for it? The pomp and circumstance is one thing, but it's so fluffed. There's a lot of fluff here, and it's supposed to be. So you have like this, he calls gathers the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials in the province. And they all come up, and it says, whenever you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, you're to fall down and worship. And this line gets repeated like 4 or 5 times. And you're just like, when you're reading it, you're like, okay, we get it. But it's just so repetitive, and it's supposed to set up this, it's a bunch of fluff. You see what he's doing, and it's such a, if you've ever had an official write you a bunch of hot air, that's what's happening here. And so it's just kind of funny too at the same time. When you read this, you're just kind of chuckling when you read it. So it's fun. So, at the sound of this, everyone in all the 127 provinces that he controls are supposed to stop, bow down, and worship the golden image. But of course, then who are the 3 fortunate souls who do not obey?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which I always wonder where Daniel is at this point.
Right.
Because he's not even mentioned.
Yeah, is he out of town? Is he on official business? Or is he doing something else?
Anyway, but his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Shadrach and Benny, if you watch the VeggieTale version.
And that's right. And I love that because they get accused, because the Jews are always going to get accused by those for being unfaithful. And, going through the book of Acts right now, the same thing happens to Paul, right? People riot and they throw him in jail, and then when he's brought before kings and governors, everyone's like, this dude's innocent. But yet he causes such havoc among those who are, accusing him.
Yeah. Well, even the Romans accused Christians of being atheists.
Right.
Because they wouldn't worship all of their pagan idols.
Yeah. Which is always kind of, if you read ancient Roman sources and things like that, when they talk about Christians, they do label us atheists. And you're like, wait a minute, why? Because we didn't worship their pantheon and their gods. We just had one God. So in their mind, we didn't worship any gods. We were atheists. So I always just think that's funny.
Anyway, so the 3 guys don't bow down.
Yep.
Like they're supposed to.
They didn't want to bow down. They get accused.
Aren't they going to give a second chance too?
Yeah. So it's like, here's your chance. When you hear all the music, and you list them all out again, you'll fall down and worship. And I love it because he kind of pushes the nose too far here. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? I love that. Let's talk about a threat towards God there. And I love Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's answer. Because how do they rebuttal the king there?
If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.
Yeah.
Basically, God can save us. He might not, but he can.
Yep.
So, and we're still not going to bow down.
Yeah. But and especially even if he doesn't, that means if God wasn't going to save us from this, we still won't do this. So talk about our culture, right? If you don't do this, we're going to do this. It's an opportunity for Christians to say, God is able to deliver us from your persecution, from your threats, from your killing us.
I'm going to say the worst they can do to us is kill us.
Right, and the Lord Jesus will just raise us from the dead. So I always love the resurrection because it's the undoing of everything that evil has tried to do. It's literally God hitting a reset button going, that's easy. Yeah, so it's just God can do this, right? So we're not going to cave into their pressures or their demands. In fact, this is an opportunity to show forth faith and trust that God will be able to do. Well, and they're not
rude or anything.
Right, they're very respectful.
This is how it is, King, sorry.
Right, so we will never cave into things that are false, right? The truth will always need to be spoken, even if it's not looked upon nicely or whatever. So yeah, so they get tossed in, and I love it because Nebuchadnezzar gets really hot, and so he orders the furnace to be made hotter, and then the guards who throw them in get killed too because that burns them. And then I always love Nebuchadnezzar. Where's the verse 24? Because it's such a sudden change. Then Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose up in haste. He almost got this shocked, whoa, wait a minute. He declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? And they're like, well, yeah, that's true. Well, why do I see 4 in there? And they're walking in the midst of the fire, and none of them are hurt. And the 4th guy, well, he looks like the son of the gods. And
wonder who that is.
Wonder who that is. It's Jesus, right? Spoiler alert. This is Jesus. Nebuchadnezzar is right here, right? He's interpreting through his polytheistic lens what he sees in there, but he's right on to notice this is the Son of God. Jesus comes and rescues them, just as he will his people. And notice how does Jesus rescue? Did he save them from the furnace?
Through the furnace.
Through the furnace. Same thing with us, right? We'll be saved through death. We'll be saved through the grave and brought to him. And so death will not touch us, even if the grave does swallow us whole. So, yeah. And of course, they get let out. And what does Nebuchadnezzar notice when they get let out?
That they're not singed or hurt or anything.
The fire did not even touch them.
They don't even smell like fire.
Right. I love it. It fits with one of the Isaiah chapter 43. I want to say it's verses 4 through 7 or 1 through 6. And it's, check me out here.
What did you say, Isaiah?
Isaiah chapter 43.
Isaiah chapter 43, what?
It's the 1 through 6 or 4 through 7, something like that.
For I have redeemed you, I have called you by name.
You are mine.
You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you.
Yeah, what verse is that?
That would be verse 2.
Verse 2, okay. So yeah, we have right off the gate there, right? This when you hear Isaiah say this, right? When you read Daniel and knowing the rest of the Old Testament, you're like, wait a minute. I know that from Isaiah chapter 43, right? You'll walk through fire, you shall not be burned. And here's how that plays out here. So the story that kind of fits with that. So good. So they come out, and then Nebuchadnezzar kind of has a change of heart here. And what's his response? He'll do this a couple times.
He makes it. They never learn.
Right.
But the decree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way.
Yeah. Indeed. No other God, right? Once you get to that point, none of the other gods, because they can maybe save you from it, right? Intervene, but they can't save you through this. And this is what Nebuchadnezzar notes. There's no other God that can do this. So it's kind of fascinating. Early Christians, when Emperor Constantine converts, right, he makes the Edict of Milan that allows Christianity to be legal in the empire. And a lot of Christians kind of saw this as a Nebuchadnezzar issuing a decree moment. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, again, by being faithful, then all of a sudden, a lot of the Babylonians are all of a sudden hearing about the God of Israel and what he's able to do. And so
what they couldn't do in their own kingdom in the Old Testament, they're able to do in exile in a foreign kingdom, which is fun. Yeah, it's a fun read. And then, of course, we get another dream. And this is we had the time to discuss how the structure of Daniel works, it kind of has like a poetic pattern to it, where you have like this dream sequence, you have this trial that happens, and then another dream sequence, and then it'll happen to Daniel at the end, where all of a sudden he has this major dream sequence. So it kind of it ramps up to that.
So what I find interesting, you get into chapter 4, you actually get first person from Nebuchadnezzar. So
Right,
presumably this is something he wrote down. I mean, that was then copied into the book of Daniel.
Yeah. So this is probably a letter from his edict, from his own court records or something like this that Daniel took and put in here or edited, or someone that knew Daniel or something like that too. So yeah, there's a lot of thoughts exactly about what's happening here, but this is probably from the hand of Nebuchadnezzar himself. So he writes in this about a dream he's had. What's his second dream here?
This is the one where he's going to go crazy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There's the tree that the branches get lopped off, but the stump is left. So isn't what the tree is him?
Yep.
And that basically means he's gonna go crazy for a while.
Yeah, he's gonna start living like an animal,
Yeah.
a wild animal. So Nebuchadnezzar, it does happen where he gets humiliated and he goes and lives like an animal and loses his mind, and then his memory does come back to him as well.
Well, because basically this is basically a punishment from God, because the Nebuchadnezzar is not this great Babylon which I've built by my mighty power. For the glory of my majesty.
So, right, these kings that have a big head and, they get carried away. And as a reminder, in the ancient world too, right, because, our structure, we have these checks and balances in place that kind of, so someone doesn't have too much power. In the ancient world, the king had the power, and what was his check and balance? Well, God. God was the one that was always above the king and can do as he pleased the king, and then the other checks and balances of the king are other kings who he has to deal with. This is how God is going to deal with someone who thinks he has all the power. So he gets humiliated, and he later comes with his senses, and this is kind of the end of Nebuchadnezzar's story here. He gets restored, and then what is he lifts up praise to God, so God restores him here. And what is I love the kind of content of his prayer there in verse 34 and 35.
For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. Oh, I suppose I should probably start from the beginning. I bless the Most High and praise and honor him who live forever, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the hosts of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" Yeah.
So God, he describes as God is above all, who can humble even the most powerful king.
Reminds me a bit of Job.
A little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Even I hear echoes of Jonah here a little bit too, being humbled, being thrown into the fish, and having a change of heart. This is my reason returned to me, and the glory, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. His counselors or his advisors sought him out, brought him back. So perhaps, as we come to the end of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, perhaps he is someone that we might meet in heaven too. Because he kind of comes to faith here at the end, and this is where we leave off with him. So the one who destroyed Jerusalem himself will be restored. Who knows? Because he does come into this end, right? For all his works are right, his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. So God works at him, and he kind of has this prayer of faith at the end too. And then you move on to the next king, right?
Belshazzar. Which is where we get the phrase, the writing's on the wall.
Yep. And what I love about this, right, you get this, here's the next king, and Nebuchadnezzar learned his lesson, but now Belshazzar needs to learn his lesson. Yep. And what happens here? You have the writing on the wall here. What happens?
Basically, Belshazzar decides he's going to take the gold that was taken from the temple in Jerusalem and use it at his party, basically, with all of his wives and his concubines and lords and stuff. And this is kind of almost like a horror story in a way. It's a good Halloween story.
Right.
The fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall, and which obviously freaked everyone out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always like picturing like a disembodied hand that's just like floating there.
Right, and cards out. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then was it the
King freaks out.
Yeah, and someone is like, "Hey, Daniel is able to."
You can do this.
Yeah, so you wonder what Daniel's position is at this point, because I mean he was big under Nebuchadnezzar, and you wonder if maybe not so big under Belshazzar.
Maybe he gets demoted or replaced or something like that.
Do we know, is Belshazzar like Nebuchadnezzar's successor, or did he take over?
I'm trying to remember the reign here. I'm not sure if he's his son or if he's, kind of usurps the throne.
Oh, it does say, "And the King Nebuchadnezzar, your father."
Okay.
Your father. Okay, I missed that.
Yeah, so he's his son.
Yeah.
And I love the mene tekel parsin here. The words that are written by the hand, and he has to parse it out here. This is the interpretation, right? Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom to bring it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. And Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And if you look up what those words are, the mene, those are examples of money scales, the shekel, the mina, the shekel, and the half. As verbs, if you take them as verbs, it means to be weighed and halved. And the Perez there, it's the singular word for Persian, which could be the word Persian. And so that God here is bringing about a final judgment on the kingdom of Babylon. Because this is the point here where we get kind of the Persians kind of coming to take over. A switch of dominion here. I used to know the history of this era really well, but now I'm starting to get foggy over the years. The very night, of course, he gets assassinated. The Chaldean king was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So a new dynasty is founded here and takes over. And then, of course, chapter 6, you move into got our lion's den right here. Good lion sitting next to us. It's kind of weird. Earlier, it felt like he was looking right at me. And I'm sure that's how Daniel felt. What I love about this one, and maybe this is a little bit ahead here in the chapter, but how do you picture Daniel with the lions?
I just picture him just like sitting there, and the lions are like, I don't know, just ignoring him.
Right.
I don't know, is how I usually picture it.
I love the image, at least as the text, because we don't, we're trying to, how do you picture this? It says that the Lord, the angel, right, came and shut the mouths of the lion. And so you almost got to wonder, Daniel might be sitting there all night, and he's probably hearing the low growls of lions.
They're like butting their heads up against.
Yeah, but they can't open their mouth and devour him, so it's almost like he can hear the threat. And imagine in the middle of the night, you're just kind of sitting there in a rock, and you just hear growling, and you hear the pacing going around you and things like that, but they're not coming to you.
They do have giant paws, too.
Right. So it's almost like God puts a hedge around. I love these stuffed animals. It's kind of freaky having them between us today.
They're from the Bethlehem Walk.
Yeah, we use them as props. So they're good props today for between us. And but yeah, it's you got this image of this is not like a peaceful Daniel's like, come here, right, and just give him like a good pat down. This is probably terrifying. And so what's Daniel probably doing all night? Praying. And this and that's the reason why Daniel got thrown in there in the first place, is because he was praying. So this is another attempt on Daniel's life, right? Is that Daniel goes off. He's faithful when the king makes an edict saying no one can worship or pray to any other god but me.
Which he got kind of tricked into doing this.
He
because
did.
The other prefects and whatever they
Jealous.
all are, the satraps, were jealous of Daniel's position. And they couldn't find any fault with him, so they had to make something up.
Yep.
Which, okay, this drives me nuts in Esther too. The whole, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which can't be revoked. So when the king makes a law, it can't be revoked even by him.
Right.
And that drives me nuts. Like, seriously.
And that's another check and balance, that the law was being held above the king, that even the king had to be submissive to the law.
But it's still annoying.
Right.
Well, and the king, that's what I read something where the king actually probably knew that Daniel prayed every day.
Right.
And so he had to know what he was getting into if he had thought about it.
And they're appealing to his pride, right? They're looking at you like, no one should ever pray to any other god but you. He's like, why are they looking to other places for help? They should look for me and pray to me. And so he kind of gets tricked into it here. But Daniel remains faithful, right? He gets found out because the adversaries here know that he's going to still do it. And that's what gets him thrown into the lion's den. And I do love the king, verse 16. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. So it's kind of like you do get that the king does not want this to happen. You get this a little bit in the story of the resurrection, a little bit. Pilate is sitting up there saying, this man has not done anything guilty, right? He might think Jesus may be weird or crazy, but he's certainly not guilty of any crime.
Yeah, doesn't deserve to be crucified.
And we're even told that Pilate seeks to let Jesus go. So we get like a little image of this, flash forward here, or even Jesus flash back.
Well, there's a lot of, isn't there a lot of parallels between this story and the resurrection?
Yeah.
Even though there's the stone gets, there's the seal over the stone, and he comes out of the tomb kind of.
So the den, it's probably like an open hole in the ground where you push someone in. And so Daniel gets, lowered into it, and you put a giant stone over the covering, right? So you can't get out even if you could. And so just as Jesus is laid in the tomb and the stone gets rolled in front of it and sealed, the stone would have been sealed by the Romans as a way of saying this hasn't been opened. And then, the stone in the morning gets rolled back, and so they can look in and see that he's fine. Just as you look in and see Jesus is alive. He's risen from the dead. You do see a lot of resurrection motifs being pulled out here. And I do love it because at the break of day, the king rose and went in haste because he can't sleep that whole night, just like the women at the tomb. Yeah. And he comes, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you? And Daniel, yes, O king, right? He has. He shut the lion. God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouths. They did not harm me because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. All right, so Daniel is not only innocent before God, but innocent of any crimes too that they've been charging him with. The king's glad. He brings up Daniel, and then what does he do? We always miss this part in the children's story.
Oh, when he throws the people who accused him and their families into the lion's den.
Right, and it's like, all right, Daniel, you are going in. And so not just them, but their whole families get thrown in too.
Yeah, we usually skip that part in the Sunday school lessons.
I love the boys have a puzzle of the scene of Daniel. It's the accusers looking in, they're shocked to see Daniel alive. And they're like, well, what happened to them that they lied? I'm like, they got thrown in. They're like 4. I'm like, they got thrown into lions and the lions ate them. They're like, they're kind of fascinated by that. One of those points in the children's stories, you missed that part that the lions did get their food. So the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones to pieces, right? So it's a way of saying, God, it wasn't just a fluke accident. So it's not like they were lowered down. The lions like, I'm not interested in you either. Right. No, the lions, before they even hit the ground, they were waiting. And this makes Darius praise God too for this. So we get the same, Nebuchadnezzar. What's true of Nebuchadnezzar is now true of King Darius. He saved Daniel from the power of the lions. And so we're told the conclusion here that Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and into the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Which is when we start getting into all of Daniel's.
And this is, the book changes. Up until this point, right, you've been reading Daniel, and it's been a story.
It's a narrative story.
Yep, narrative, what you're used to and enjoy the most in the scriptures. But from chapter 7 to the end of the book, chapter 14.
It's more like the prophets again.
Yeah, it's prophetic.
Which is probably why we stick Daniel in the prophets, even though...
Yeah.
It's technically considered the writings, isn't it, in the Hebrew?
Right. Yeah, in the Hebrew Bible, it doesn't fit in with the prophets.
It goes with Esther and Ezra and Nehemiah.
And Ruth and Chronicles and Psalms and Job and all that. So here we get to chapter 7. This is where we get some interesting images, though. It is here, we could talk about all what Daniel sees. So Daniel gets to see a vision of, as he's hoping to go home. But here, it's kind of going to be made clear that Daniel, yes, you're going to go home, but it's not going to be when you think. There's going to be waves of this happening. It's going to take a much longer time than you're thinking. Yeah, it looks like you're going to say something there. It looks like you had a thought, Pruin.
It's just, this is where, because a little later, he knows from Jeremiah that after, 70 years, this is why he starts praying and getting these visions, is because he knows that time's almost up. Yeah, and so it's like, okay, are we going to be returning to the promised land or not? Right. And this is kind of God's answer to him, which it's a lot of prophetic kind of, again, it reminds me a bit of Job in a lot of ways, because it's kind of like, okay, here's exactly what's going to happen, because I'm God and I know what's going to happen. Right. And this kind of, as you get to the end of chapter 7, it kind of freaks Daniel out.
because he sees this and he has a timetable of, okay, what's going to happen here? Are we going back home? Are we going to reset our kingdom here? And what he gets shown actually kind of terrifies him, because he gets shown that, yeah, you're going to go back home, but you're still going to be ruled by someone else. And then this is going to happen, and then, this kingdom is going to rise, they're going to fall, and then I'm going to do my work. Is what he kind of sees, and this alarms him. This kind of terrifies him, and we're told he actually stays silent about this. He doesn't tell anyone about what he's seen. Chapter 7-2 is where we get the famous account of the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man.
Which is why Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. And that's where the priests finally, on his trial, isn't that when he finally tears his robes and it's like, this guy's blaspheming?
Yep.
Because they know what Jesus is saying, I'm the Son of Man, and
I'm this guy.
Yeah,
here.
He's referencing with the clouds of heaven, that whole imagery.
And this is kind of, this is a lot of theology that backs up into this. The cloud, a pillar of cloud by day that guided the people of Israel. So that's kind of God's presence, His power on display. Here we see that, right? This, and Jesus quotes this, Stephen quotes this, Revelation says this a lot. I saw in the night visions, behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, Revelation 5, which we just did this past weekend, and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So as we this language for Jesus, this is why he calls himself the Son of Man. This is how Jesus is interpreting it. And so when he does declare it, you'll see the Son of Man coming to clouds. He finally reveals what exactly he is meaning when he says Son of Man. And that's what causes everyone to tear their clothes, because they know he's claiming divine authority and headship.
He's not just claiming, like Ezekiel's always referred to as the Son of Man too. This is...
Yeah, he's not even just claiming being king of the Jews, right? That might just be enough.
Prophet, he's
claiming the whole hog here, and no one can do that.
He's claiming he deserves to be worshipped like God, because he is God.
Right, and he's their king and dominion, and this doesn't fly with them. But Daniel's troubled at this,
We get the whole 4 beasts, which 4 beasts show up a lot, because that showed up in Ezekiel 2, it shows up in Revelation.
And, what exactly is going on here, it's tough to say, right?
People try to match up various rising and fallings of kings and kingdoms, and
right.
That's not the point.
It's not exactly the point. It's just detailing that there's just going to be conflict and struggle, and just when you think it's going to go one way, another thing's going to happen to supplant it.
Well, it also kind of just shows that, again, God is in control, because he's like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the next, couple thousand years or whatever, or however long this is, and he knows exactly what's going to happen, and so it's like, okay, I'm in control even when it seems like everything's chaotic.
Right. God's going to bring order to this. He's going to bring order out of it. So there's, for the beast, exactly, you could describe it maybe as like the 4 kinds of creatures, right? That kind of spread out over all the earth. We still do north, south, east, west, right? So all creation, what exactly is going on here, there's a lot of thoughts. And it'd take you could do an hour-long podcast just trying to break those thoughts down. But it is interesting at the very least. But ultimately, like you said, it's just showing God's authority, and he's in control here as that goes forward. What else do you notice here as you kind of push forward into these chapters? Anything else that kind of sticks out?
Well, there's all this, like the weeks and this number of evenings, and which we don't really know what that means exactly either, do we?
A lot when you get into like the Abomination of Desolation is mentioned here in Daniel. This is what's going to happen in the age of the Apocrypha, during the first Maccabees here, when the Greeks set up...
That's the intertestamental period.
Yep. So in between 430 BC, when the Bible in Malachi closes, to opening it up in 4 to 7, 8 BC when Jesus is born. You have 430 years, the time between Genesis and Exodus, really, of culture events that happen, changes in government, changes in who's in control.
Yeah, because so the Abomination of Desolation, didn't they set up a statue of Zeus or something in the temple?
So was it Antiochus Epiphanes IV? He's the Greek ruler at this point, and I think 167 BC. He comes into Jerusalem, and at this point, the Jews have been allowed to be Jews, But he's a Greek, and he wants everyone to become Hellenized. He wants everyone to be a Greek. So he comes into the Jewish temple, which is already a no-no, and he sets up a statue to Zeus, and he tells the Jews, you will now sacrifice to Zeus, and as show of it, he has a Jewish person come forward and sacrifice a pig in the temple to Zeus. And one of the priests, who has to be Maccabees, that starts a revolt, he goes up and kills the Jew, kills the representative, and starts a revolt. And that's 167. That's the first book of First Maccabees, if you want to read more on how that goes. So the book of Daniel is detailing those events, what's going to happen in those days. Jesus will refer back to those things as a way of saying, here's what you should look forward to as well, when worship of Jesus is displaced for someone else, if you will. So, there's a lot of stark imagery here. Jesus is looking at Jesus here. Daniel here is seeing what's going to happen politically leading up to Christ, you could say. There's another fascinating story is that he prays to find an interpretation, and the angel Gabriel comes to him and gives him the interpretation. Who told he was being held back by the Prince of Persia?
Yeah, I think so. Where are we?
This is chapter 9.
Yeah, there's Gabriel brings
Oh, where's it at?
I know what you're talking about, but
Of course. Now when you need to find it is when you can't find it.
You keep talking, I'll look.
Okay, you find it for me. But Daniel comes and he says, the moment that you prayed, I came to show you the interpretation, but I was held up by the Prince of Persia, I think 21 days or something like that.
Yeah, it was 21 days. I remember that.
And and you're like, what in the world? This is often thought to be, in the Bible, you have your powers, you have your your kings and your emperors and things like that. And that's the power that we can see, but there is the power that we cannot see behind them. So the spiritual force is at play. And so a lot of people think that there's a spiritual force that was holding Gabriel back, opposing him, until Gabriel was able to overcome and get to Daniel to give him what this means. We live in a world in which the spiritual forces, which are our enemies, are at play to try to hinder the Christian church and the people of God, even in the Old Testament here. But I
cannot find it. Because there's I actually have a header that says Gabriel brings an answer, but that's not where it is.
Right. And that's what I was thinking it was there too, but
anyway.
I mistake. It's somewhere in there though, but if we find it as we go through, we'll see it.
Okay, because then we get into the whole 70 weeks. The 70 weeks are decreed, which weeks aren't apparently weeks.
And 70 is how you get your full answer. This is also how you get the time, times, and half a time.
Yeah, because I know some people haven't figured out where it actually does. If each week is 7 years or something, then you do actually get from this point. It's the right number of years to when Jesus comes or something.
Right.
I don't know.
And there's a lot
it doesn't really...
There's a lot of the temple worship. 70 weeks could refer to the temple being burned down, to the restoration of the temple.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that thought there too.
Again, don't get your theology solely from the second half of Daniel and Revelation, basically.
And also recognize that often in prophetic literature, there's usually more than one thing going on. So Daniel... He might use something to pinpoint him, but he has a much broader meaning than just one event.
Yeah.
He's looking at a full scope of things and how this continues to be repeated again and again and again.
Because I think with the whole weeks, because it says in chapter 9 verses 27, he will make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. I think that's where people think the destruction of Jerusalem or whatever this in 70 AD. But
and if you have a study Bible at this point, they'll usually kind of help you cue you in on a few things. Like here, this is the diagram for me on this page. It has the 70 weeks and the traditional interpretation and the typological. So what's this pointing to? And it has a completely different way of seeing it. So what exactly is going on? The best can't even tell you exactly what A to A and B to B here.
Again, that's not really the point.
No, it's not. It's just kind of trying to point out here that the Lord's in charge. There's going to be tumults and wars and all this happening, but the Lord will be above it all, and he will bring victory. So Daniel's supposed to kind of take comfort in that, which is actually how the book ends, too, which we'll get there shortly.
Oh, I found the 21... Okay, in chapter? It's Michael, not Gabriel. Chapter 10,
Michael.
Start verse 12... I think it's Michael anyway. Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. That's where I got Michael. For I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what has happened to your people in the latter days, for the vision is for days yet to come.
Right. So what's going on? Yeah, some people think, this is heavenly, maybe it's a earthly messenger, who knows? So there's a lot of things to untangle here with that.
It's gonna be, if it's an earthly messenger, it could be like where Paul says in his epistles, we wanted to come to you, but we were prevented.
Right.
And,
it's that same thing.
God has to open up the way kind of thing.
Right. So there's that thought maybe here too. A lot of, it's fun. We could do just, like I said, hour-long podcast just trying to read and discern this.
The kings of the south and the north, and I know some people like to interpret like Russia's the kingdom of the north or something, and
usually what most people do is that after Alexander the Great died, was it 321 BC? After he died, his kingdom was split up into 4 parts, but 2 of them were kind of sucked up immediately into the other 2, and you had 2 powerful Greek worlds, the Ptolemies, and I'm gonna blank out here. I'll have to look this up again. But you had 2 powerful, and there was one that more was northern, the other one that was more southern. And they kind of went back and forth on dominance, who was going to be more powerful. One of them was a little bit more tolerant of other people not being Greeks. The other one was we're going to make people be Greeks.
So all of these kingdoms largely are probably everything up until before Jesus came. So It's not really anything probably to do with us now. So you can't be trying to, because people are,
because Daniel's seeing stuff about the future, but who's to say that stuff is still in the future? There's probably typological meaning that still has yet to come, but there is, the fulfillment has already been done, but there's more fulfillment.
He's asking what's going to happen to his people, which would be the Jews,
right. Yeah, and because some people will take this timeline up to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and then that's where they'll end it. So there's that whole interpretation of it too. So a lot going on.
Yes.
So wars and rumors of wars, Jesus uses this language too. And then you get to the time of the end, chapter 12 there.
Which the Mormons use this to say that Jesus is Michael, or is it the Jehovah's Witness?
Right.
And I can never remember which one it is. But
and when you stop to ask, we should say, what do we mean when we say Jesus is Michael? Are we saying that he is one of the many angels in heaven, or is he Michael, the Michael, right? The kind of Jesus as the Son of the Father, who is God's messenger, which is where we get the word angel. So Jesus as a messenger, he's a cute, fluffy angel, but he is God's messenger, because that's what angels are in the Bible. And in times, most of the angels aren't even described with wings.
They just look like young men or whatever.
Right, you confuse them with your young man that you cross in the street. So angels can look like that. So angels, when we talk about that, we just mean a messenger, someone who is sent on behalf of God to deliver a message here. So Michael, and a lot of times typologically, he is Jesus. He's the one who is the ruler of his people. He's the one who will save his people. Michael, I think, what does it mean? It's one who is like God, which is what I do believe what his name means, off the top of my head, if I'm remembering that name correctly. So who is like God?
So really,
Jesus.
At the time shall arise one who is like God.
Right.
The great prince.
Right. Who is charge of your people. And who is, because Jesus will say, right, the Father has given them to me, right? The charge has been given to his Father, right? All authority has been given to me, charged to me. When we say that, we don't mean it in the way that Jehovah's Witnesses say that Jesus is Michael and he's just one of the many angels and gods up there.
Yeah.
We mean it in the sense of he is like how you call Jesus Emmanuel, or you call him the Rose of Sharon, or you call him any of the other Old Testament names, right? This is just a prefigurement, a pre-name that you attach on to the one who is the one who is the Son of the Father, right? Equal with God, right? One with the Father, all that good stuff. So, and Daniel gets kind of freaked out. He wants to know more about this, right, as you kind of keep reading the chapter here. Chapter 12 is the final chapter, and he's looking for meaning. He's like, what does this mean, and what's he told?
Where is that? I heard, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end.
Right, so you got shown this. I'm not going to tell you what it means. Don't worry about it. You just go and do what you need to do, what God has given you today. But go your way to the end, and you shall rest, and you shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. So Daniel leaves with the thought that the Lord will preserve him and bring him into his everlasting kingdom. And we as Christians too should have that same thing. We might not have all of our answers. We might not know exactly how it's all going to go down, but rest assured God's going to take care of the matter, and we will be brought through too. So kind of a thoughtful ending for us as well.
So we don't need to know what's going to happen in the end.
We don't, right? We just know that
We
he's going to
might
take care of it.
want to know, but we don't need to know. And yeah, you always want to be wary of Christians who try to make more meaning out of some of this than, they make their whole theology off of weird prophecies.
Yeah.
That we don't really understand fully.
And you hear this at the end of the book of Revelation, right? The many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and refined. The wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. You have that in Revelation. The one who is good will be good. The one who is filthy will continue to be filthy. It's not giving permission for those things. It's just saying people are going to do these. They're going to be good. They're going to be filthy. They're going to be wicked. They're going to be righteous. But let those who hear, as it were. And now you've been told, go your way, and at the end of days you'll stand and take your allotted reward. You'll shine like the brightness of the sun. So a promise for us too who have been made righteous in Christ and made good by him. So good stuff. Well, with that kind of comes to the end of the book of Daniel. But is there anything that sticks out to you about anything we might miss?
I don't know, I think we covered it. I mean, like you said, you could go into a lot of this detail if you really wanted to,
right.
But it's, again, you don't need to understand it all. That's not really the point of it.
Right. The best thing to be would probably to hear that last verse that says, go your way until the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Yep. So for us too, right? You might understand all the words of this book or what's going on in the world. Don't worry about it. God's going to take care of it. So.
And you don't have to worry that much about who's in control. I mean, whoever president is right now doesn't really,
Right, doesn't spell doom.
No, because... Stop. Because the United States will probably no longer exist at some point, just
right.
Like every other kingdom in the last 6,000 years has at some point...
Come and gone.
Yeah.
Right? Rise and fall of kingdoms. But Christ's kingdom is one that will endure forever.
Yep.
Thanks be to God. Good. All right. Well, with that, then I guess we'll close with a word of prayer and give a final blessing. Dear Father in heaven, you who have given to us a kingdom that shall never pass away, you who have made us citizens and made us a people and a priest unto our God, we give thanks that you have redeemed us. You've made us new in the blood of your Son. Lord, continue to guide us as your people who live in exile in this world around us. That even here, as beautiful as a place as Marshfield is, that you have called us to live in exile and faithfulness here. Help us to be that light to the world, to show forth your kingdom, your love, and your grace through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen.